I called the police after my brother stole my car overnight and returned it empty on gas. The officer's hand rested on his belt as he read my brother's driver's license under the porch light. Behind him, my Subaru sat in the driveway with the driver's door still open, interior light spilling onto the pavement. The gas gauge showed completely empty. Not low. Empty. The needle buried past the E like it was trying to hide from what it was telling me. My brother Liam stood 3 feet away from me, barefoot, holding his phone like he was about to record this whole thing for evidence that I was the crazy one here. His girlfriend Natasha hovered behind him, arms crossed, shooting me looks that could melt steel. Mom was calling my phone for the 4th time in 10 minutes. I let it go to voicemail again because I already knew what she was going to say. That I was overreacting. That family doesn't call the police on family. That I was being dramatic over a simple mistake. But here's the thing nobody seemed to understand. This wasn't a mistake. This was theft. This was the 5th time in 3 months. And this time, I had proof. The whole thing started in August when I bought the Subaru Outback. I'd saved for 2 years, working double shifts at the hospital where I was a respiratory therapist. Every extra hour I could get, I took it. Holidays, weekends, overnight shifts that left me so tired, I'd sit in my car for 10 minutes in the parking garage before driving home because I didn't trust myself not to fall asleep at a red light. $23,000. I paid cash. The dealership manager, David Kowalski, actually seemed impressed. He told me most people my age financed everything. But I didn't want payments. I didn't want interest. I wanted something that was completely, totally, legally mine. My brother showed up at the dealership that day because Mom asked him to. She said I needed someone there who understood cars, someone who could make sure I wasn't getting ripped off. Liam worked as a parts manager at an auto shop, so technically, he knew his way around vehicles. What I didn't know then was that he was already forming a plan. The first time Liam took my car was 3 days after I bought it. I woke up on a Saturday morning to go hiking with some coworkers, walked outside with my coffee and backpack, and my car was gone. Just gone. The spot where I'd parked it the night before was empty, except for an oil stain from the previous tenant's car. My stomach dropped. My first thought was that it had been stolen, so I called the police. Officer Raymond Gutierrez showed up 20 minutes later, took my information, and was halfway through filling out the report when Liam pulled into the parking lot in my Subaru. He got out smiling, holding a coffee cup from the Starbucks 2 miles away, looking confused about why a cop car was in the lot. When Officer Gutierrez asked him what he was doing with my vehicle, Liam laughed. He actually laughed. He said I'd told him he could borrow it whenever he needed to because we were brothers, and that's what family does. I stood there, frozen, because I absolutely had not said that. Not once. Not ever. But Officer Gutierrez looked at me like he was waiting for me to confirm or deny it, and Liam kept smiling, kept acting like this was all some hilarious misunderstanding. I told Officer Gutierrez that I hadn't given Liam permission, that I didn't even know Liam had a spare key. Liam's smile faltered for half a second, then came back stronger. He reached into his pocket and held up a key fob. He said I'd given it to him at the dealership, told him to hold on to it in case I ever locked myself out. And here's where it got really sick. I had given him a spare key at the dealership. David Kowalski had given me 3 keys total when I bought the car, and I'd handed one to Liam for exactly 5 seconds while I signed some final paperwork. I told him to put it in my backpack. I watched him walk toward my backpack. I assumed he'd done it. Apparently, he'd pocketed it instead. Officer Gutierrez asked if I wanted to press charges. Liam's face went white. I could see actual fear flicker across his expression for the first time. But then my phone rang. Mom. I answered without thinking, and she was already talking before I could say hello. She wanted to know why Liam had just texted her saying I called the cops on him over borrowing my car. Her voice had that tone she gets when she's disappointed, when she thinks I'm being difficult or dramatic or unreasonable. She asked if I was seriously going to ruin Liam's life over a misunderstanding. She said Liam's girlfriend was pregnant, that they were struggling financially, that his car was in the shop and he'd needed something reliable to get to work, that he'd tried calling me but I hadn't answered, that he'd assumed, reasonably, that I wouldn't mind. Reasonably. I told Officer Gutierrez I didn't want to press charges. He looked at me for a long moment, then looked at Liam, then back at me. He said that if there was a pattern of unauthorized vehicle use, I should document everything. Times, dates, mileage, fuel levels. He said family disputes got messy, but theft was theft regardless of who did it. Then he left. Liam immediately tried to apologize, but his apology was weird. It wasn't sorry I took your car without asking. It was sorry you got upset about a misunderstanding. He said he'd genuinely thought I wouldn't mind, that he'd tried calling me at 6 in the morning, but I'd been asleep so he'd just grabbed the key and gone. He said his car was making a weird noise, and he couldn't risk breaking down on the way to work. He said he'd filled the tank before returning it, which was supposed to make it okay somehow. Like stealing something is fine if you put gas in it first. I told him to give me the spare key back. He did, right there in the parking lot, but I could see something in his eyes that told me this wasn't over. It looked like resentment, like I was the one being unreasonable, like I was the bad guy for wanting control over my own property. I should have trusted that look. I should have changed my locks that day. I didn't. The second time was 3 weeks later. I came home from a night shift at 4 in the morning and my car wasn't there. Again. This time I didn't call the police. I called Liam. He answered on the 6th ring, groggy, annoyed. He said he didn't have my car. I asked if he was sure, and he got defensive. He wanted to know why I was accusing him of stuff. I asked where my car was then, and he said he didn't know. Maybe I should check if I actually parked it where I thought I parked it. Like I was confused. Like I was having some kind of mental break. I went back downstairs and walked the entire parking lot, checked every single row, thinking maybe I was tired enough to have misremembered. Nothing. I went back upstairs and tried to sleep, but couldn't. At 6 in the morning, I heard an engine outside. I looked out the window, and there was my Subaru, parking in my spot. Liam got out, looked around like he was checking if anyone was watching, then jogged toward the visitor parking where apparently his car was. I ran downstairs in my pajamas and caught him before he could leave. I asked him what the hell he thought he was doing. He said his car had broken down the night before, and he'd needed mine for an emergency. I asked what emergency. He said Natasha had a pregnancy scare and needed to go to the ER. I asked why he didn't call me, wake me up, ask like a normal person. He said I'd been at work, and he didn't want to bother me. He said he was going to tell me about it this morning. He said it like he was the considerate one here. I asked him how he got my key if I'd taken the spare back. He hesitated, just for a second, then said he'd made a copy before giving the original back to me. Just in case of emergencies like this. I told him to give me the copy. He said he didn't have it on him. I said I'd wait. He said it was at his apartment. I said I'd drive there with him right now. He said Natasha wasn't feeling well, and he needed to get home to her. I said that wasn't my problem. He got angry then. Actually angry. He said I was being paranoid and controlling, that he was family and I should trust him, that he'd literally never damaged my car or failed to return it. He said most people would be grateful to have a brother who cared enough to maintain an emergency backup plan. Grateful. Like he was doing me a favor by keeping an unauthorized key to my vehicle. I told him if he didn't give me every copy he had by the end of the day, I was going to report the car as stolen next time it went missing. He said that was a threat. I said no, it was a boundary. There's a difference. He left. 6 hours later, he texted me a photo of a single car key sitting on his kitchen counter with a timestamp. He said that was the only copy. I wanted to believe him. Part of me knew better. The third time was in early October. I'd started parking my car in a different spot every night, rotating between 3 different areas of the complex like I was trying to outsmart a car thief. Which I was. Because my brother was effectively a car thief, even if nobody else wanted to call it that. I'd also installed a dash cam, front and rear, that activated on motion detection. Cost me $230, but it felt necessary. I didn't tell anyone about the cameras. Not Mom, not Liam, nobody. I wanted evidence if this happened again. And it did. I woke up on a Friday morning and my car was gone. The dashcam app on my phone showed me exactly what happened. At 2:14 in the morning, someone approached my car with a key fob. The motion sensors activated the cameras. I watched Liam unlock my car, get in, adjust the seat, and drive away. Crystal clear footage. His face illuminated by the interior light. No question about who it was. The timestamp, the license plate, everything. I had him. The cameras caught him returning the car 5 hours later, at 7:18 in the morning. He parked it in a completely different spot from where I'd left it, 3 rows over. Like I wouldn't notice. Like I was stupid. The fuel gauge in the dash footage showed he'd used a quarter tank. He hadn't refilled it. I downloaded the footage to 3 different locations. My phone, my laptop, and a cloud backup. Then I called a lawyer. Not to sue Liam, not yet, but to understand what my options were. The lawyer's name was Gregory Barnett, and he specialized in property law and family disputes. He watched the dashcam footage in his office while I sat across from him trying not to shake from anger. When it finished, he leaned back in his chair and asked me why I hadn't called the police yet. I told him Liam was my brother. Gregory said that didn't matter. He said unauthorized use of a vehicle was a crime in our state, that it didn't require the vehicle to be damaged or not returned. The act of taking it without permission was enough. He asked if I'd documented the previous incidents. I told him about the first 2 times, admitted I didn't have proof of those. He said the dashcam footage was sufficient for this incident, and if there was a pattern, the previous incidents would support a harassment claim. He asked what I wanted to happen. I told him I just wanted Liam to stop. Gregory looked at me like I was naive. He said people don't stop behaviors that have no consequences. He said every time I'd let this slide, I'd taught Liam that there were no real boundaries, that he could keep doing this because I'd always back down to keep peace in the family. He was right. I knew he was right. But the thought of actually pressing charges against my own brother made me feel sick. I tried one more time to handle it privately. I drove to Liam's apartment that afternoon with my laptop. Natasha answered the door, visibly pregnant now, looking tired. She let me in without asking why I was there. Liam was on the couch playing video games. He barely looked up when I walked in. I set my laptop on the coffee table and played the dashcam footage. The room went quiet, except for the sound of my car engine starting in the video. I watched Liam's face as he watched himself stealing my car. He went pale. When the video ended, I asked him why. He didn't answer for a long time. Natasha was staring at him, and I realized she hadn't known. She'd believed whatever story he'd told her about borrowing my car with permission. Finally, Liam said his car had broken down again, and he couldn't afford to fix it. He said he needed reliable transportation for work. He said he was going to tell me eventually. He said he was planning to ask me if he could borrow the car regularly until he got his fixed, but he kept chickening out because he knew I'd say no. I asked him why he thought I'd say no. He said because I was selfish with my stuff. Selfish. I'd let him borrow my car twice before I bought this one. I'd given him rides constantly. I'd helped him move apartments. But because I wanted control over a vehicle I'd saved 2 years to buy, I was selfish. I told him he had 24 hours to surrender every key, every copy, every possible way he had of accessing my vehicle. I told him if he touched my car again, I was pressing charges. Natasha started crying. She asked if I was really going to send the father of her baby to jail over a car. I said no, Liam was going to send himself to jail if he kept committing crimes. She called me heartless. Liam said nothing. He just sat there looking at the frozen image of himself on my laptop screen. I left. The next day, Liam showed up at my apartment with 2 keys. He said that was everything. I asked if he was sure. He swore. I wanted to believe him. I didn't. I took the keys and told him we were done. Not as brothers, but with this. With the borrowing, the emergencies, the assumptions. He said I was overreacting. I closed the door. 2 weeks of peace followed. My car stayed where I parked it. No mysterious disappearances. No early morning thefts. I started to think maybe it was actually over. Maybe Liam had finally understood that this wasn't okay, that there were consequences, that I meant what I said. I let my guard down. That was my mistake. The 4th time happened on a Wednesday night in late October. I'd worked a 16-hour shift, came home at midnight, parked my car, and dragged myself upstairs. I was so tired I didn't even check the dashcam app. I just fell into bed and passed out. When I woke up 8 hours later and looked out the window, my car was there. Same spot. I felt relieved. Then I went downstairs to leave for work and noticed the fuel gauge. Empty. Completely empty. It had been 3/4 full when I parked it. I checked the dashcam footage. At 3 in the morning, Liam had taken my car. The footage showed him driving it away, then returning it 4 hours later. The rear camera caught him pulling into a gas station, but not actually pumping gas. He'd just parked there for a minute, then left. He'd driven my car for 4 hours, used an entire tank of fuel, and returned it empty like I wouldn't notice. Like I wouldn't care. Like this was still somehow acceptable behavior. I sat in my car in the parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to decide what to do. The rational part of my brain said, call the police. The family loyalty part said, give him one more chance. The exhausted part said, just change the locks and be done with it. I called Mom instead. Mom answered cheerfully, asking how I was, if I wanted to come over for dinner this weekend. I asked if she'd talked to Liam recently. She said yes, just yesterday. He'd mentioned money was tight, but they were managing. I asked if he'd mentioned borrowing my car. Long pause. Then she asked why. I told her about the footage, about the empty tank, about the 4th time he'd stolen my vehicle. She said stolen was a strong word. I said it was the accurate word. She asked what I wanted her to do about it. I realized I didn't know. I think I wanted her to be on my side, to acknowledge that what Liam was doing was wrong, to help me make him stop. Instead, she said boys will be boys, that Liam probably didn't think it was a big deal since we were family, that I should just talk to him again. Boys will be boys. Like car theft was a quirky personality trait. Like I was being uptight for expecting basic respect for my property. I told her I was done talking to Liam. I told her the next time he touched my car, I was calling the police and pressing charges. She said I was being cruel. She said Liam had made mistakes, but he was trying his best. She said Natasha's pregnancy was high risk and Liam was under a lot of stress. She said family was supposed to support each other, not threaten each other with legal action. I asked her if stealing from family was supporting them. She said it wasn't stealing if he always brought it back. I hung up. That afternoon, I drove to a locksmith. I explained the situation without naming names, just said someone kept accessing my vehicle without permission, and I needed to make sure they couldn't anymore. The locksmith, whose name was Leonard Fisher, and who'd been doing this for 32 years according to the certificate on his wall, told me I needed to rekey the entire ignition and door lock system. Cost me $815. He said it would take about 3 hours. I waited in the shop, drinking terrible coffee from a machine in the corner, watching Leonard work. He asked me if the person who kept taking my car knew where I lived. I said yes. He asked if they had any reason to get violent or destructive if they couldn't access the vehicle anymore. I thought about Liam. Thought about his anger when I'd confronted him before. His resentment. The way he'd called me selfish, controlling, paranoid. I said I didn't think so, but I wasn't sure. Leonard suggested I park somewhere with cameras for a while, somewhere public, just in case. When he finished, he handed me 4 new keys. He said he'd destroyed the old lock cylinders so the previous keys were worthless now. He told me to keep these new keys secure, not to let anyone else have access. I promised. I went home, parked under a light in full view of 2 security cameras, and for the first time in months, I slept through the night without worrying. 3 weeks passed. No incidents. Liam texted me a few times, casual stuff, asking how I was doing. I responded minimally. Mom invited me to Thanksgiving dinner. I said I'd think about it. Liam called me once, said he wanted to apologize in person for everything that had happened. He said he realized he'd crossed boundaries and wanted to make it right. I asked if Natasha knew everything. He said yes, they'd talked about it. He said she was embarrassed by how she'd reacted when I confronted them. He said they both wanted to start fresh. I didn't believe him, but I also didn't want to carry this anger forever. I agreed to meet him for coffee. We met at a place near my apartment, neutral ground. Liam showed up looking humble, beaten down. He apologized for taking my car without permission. He said he'd been in a bad place financially and mentally, that he'd made poor choices, that he understood why I'd rekeyed the locks. He said he didn't blame me. He asked if we could move forward. I said moving forward meant respecting boundaries. He agreed. We talked for an hour. It felt genuine. I wanted it to be genuine. When we left, he hugged me. I let him. I drove home feeling like maybe, finally, this was resolved. That night, I went to a friend's birthday party and stayed out late. Didn't drink much, just enough to relax. I got home around 1 a.m, parked my car, went upstairs. Everything was fine. Everything was normal. Until I woke up at 6 a.m. to my phone ringing. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. A woman's voice, official sounding, asked if I was the owner of a Subaru Outback with a specific license plate number. My stomach dropped. I said yes. She identified herself as Officer Patricia Vance with the State Highway Patrol. She said my vehicle had been pulled over 3 hours ago for erratic driving. The driver had failed a field sobriety test and was currently being held on suspicion of DUI. The driver had given my name and address as the vehicle owner. I asked who the driver was. She told me I'd need to come to the station to sort it out, but his license said his name was Liam, and he'd claimed I'd given him permission to use the vehicle. I felt like I was falling, like the bed had dropped out from under me. I asked Officer Vance how that was possible when I'd been sleeping and had my keys with me. She said that's why she was calling. She said the situation didn't make sense, and if the vehicle had been taken without my permission, I needed to come in and make a statement. I got dressed in a daze, drove to the highway patrol station. The whole way there, I couldn't figure out how Liam had gotten access to my car. I'd rekeyed everything. I had all 4 keys in my apartment. There was no way he could have copies. If this story keeps your interest, please subscribe to get more stories like this. Officer Vance met me in the lobby. She was maybe 40, with sharp eyes that looked like they'd seen every lie ever told. She took me to a conference room and explained the situation. Liam had been pulled over at 3:20 a.m. for swerving. When the officer approached the vehicle, Liam appeared disoriented and smelled of alcohol. He failed the field sobriety test. He refused the breathalyzer. His blood alcohol content was being determined at the hospital, but based on the officer's observations, he was likely over the legal limit. The vehicle, my vehicle, had minor damage to the front bumper consistent with hitting something, possibly a curb or pole. Liam claimed I'd let him borrow the car earlier that evening. Officer Vance asked if that was true. I said no. I said Liam had a history of taking my car without permission, that I'd rekeyed the locks specifically to prevent this, that I had no idea how he'd accessed it this time. Officer Vance asked if I wanted to press charges. I said yes. Without hesitation this time. Yes. She nodded and started typing. She asked me to provide a detailed history of every incident. I spent the next 2 hours walking her through everything. The first time, the second, the third, the fourth, the dashcam footage I still had saved, the lawyer consultation, the rekeying, the coffee shop reconciliation, all of it. Officer Vance listened without interrupting, taking notes. When I finished, she asked if she could see my keys. I showed her all 4. She examined them carefully, then called someone. 10 minutes later, a detective arrived. Detective William Granger introduced himself as the lead investigator for property crimes in the county. He'd been a detective for 19 years, specialized in theft and fraud cases. He looked at my keys, looked at the report Officer Vance had written, then asked if he could inspect my vehicle. We walked out to the parking lot together. My Subaru was parked in an impound slot, front bumper dented, driver's door slightly ajar. Detective Granger pulled on gloves and opened the door. He checked the ignition, the door locks, everything. Then he found it. A small device attached under the steering column, barely visible. He carefully removed it and held it up. It was an aftermarket remote start system, the kind you can buy online and install yourself. The kind that bypasses the ignition and allows you to start the vehicle with a separate remote control. Detective Granger explained that someone with basic mechanical knowledge could install this in about 30 minutes. Once installed, they could start and drive the vehicle without a key. He asked if I'd had this installed. I said no. He asked if I knew who did. I said I had a pretty good idea. Liam worked at an auto shop. He had access to parts, tools, knowledge. He could have installed this any of the times he'd borrowed my car before I rekeyed it. He'd been planning ahead, setting up a backup system in case I ever changed the locks. Which I did. And he'd just waited. Waited until I thought it was safe. Waited until I let my guard down. Then used it. Detective Granger bagged the device as evidence. He said installing an unauthorized remote start system in someone else's vehicle qualified as tampering, which was a separate crime from the unauthorized use. Combined with Liam's DUI, the damage to my vehicle, and the pattern of previous thefts, We were looking at multiple charges. He said the district attorney would review everything and decide what to file, but I should expect Liam to face serious consequences this time. He asked if I understood that this would likely destroy my relationship with my brother and cause significant family conflict. I said I understood. He asked if I still wanted to proceed. I said yes. He nodded and told me to go home, that someone would contact me about next steps. I drove home in a rental car the insurance company provided while my Subaru was processed as evidence. When I got back to my apartment, I had 37 missed calls, 19 from Mom, 12 from Natasha, 6 from relatives I barely talked to. I didn't call any of them back. I turned off my phone and went to bed even though it was barely noon. I slept for 14 hours. When I woke up, my phone was still off. I made coffee, sat on my couch, and thought about what came next. The calls, the accusations, the family members who would say I'd gone too far, the ones who would say family doesn't do this to family, the guilt trips, the manipulation, the pressure to drop the charges. I thought about all of it. Then I thought about Liam's face in that dashcam footage, the casual way he'd unlocked my car, the entitlement in his expression, the absolute certainty that he could do this without consequences. I thought about how he'd lied to police when pulled over, how he'd driven my car drunk, how he'd damaged it, how he'd installed that remote starter weeks ago, maybe months ago, just waiting for another opportunity to use my property like it was his. I turned my phone back on. The voicemail started immediately. I listened to Mom's first message. She was crying, saying Liam had called her from jail, that he'd made a mistake, that he needed help, not punishment. She said I was being vindictive, that I was letting pride destroy our family. She said if I pressed charges, she'd never forgive me. The second message was angrier. She said Liam had explained everything, that he'd only borrowed the car because his had broken down and he needed to pick up medicine for Natasha, that he'd had one drink earlier in the evening but wasn't drunk, that the police had overreacted, that I was overreacting. The third message was Mom saying she'd talked to a lawyer, that what I was doing qualified as family harassment, that Liam could countersue me for emotional distress. That wasn't true, but she believed it, or wanted to believe it. The fourth message was just her crying. I deleted them all without listening to the rest. Natasha's messages were worse. Threats, insults, accusations that I was trying to ruin her baby's life before it was even born, that I was a terrible person, a terrible brother, that karma would get me, that she hoped I ended up alone and miserable. I saved those, sent them to Detective Granger. He called me back within an hour. Detective Granger said Natasha's messages constituted harassment and witness intimidation. He asked if I wanted to pursue charges against her too. I said no, not yet, but I wanted them documented. He said they already were, that everything was being logged in the case file. He told me Liam had been arraigned that morning, that bail had been set at $20,000. Liam couldn't afford it. He was staying in jail pending trial. Mom had apparently tried to bail him out, but she didn't have the money either. Detective Granger said the DA had filed 4 charges against Liam: unauthorized use of a vehicle, criminal mischief for the bumper damage, DUI, and installation of a tracking device without consent. That last one I didn't understand. Detective Granger explained that the remote starter technically qualified as a tracking device because it had GPS capabilities. It allowed Liam to know where my car was at all times. He'd been tracking my vehicle, watching my patterns, knowing when I was home, when I was at work, when I went out. The thought made my skin crawl. Detective Granger said if convicted on all charges, Liam was looking at 3 to 5 years in prison and significant fines. He asked again if I wanted to proceed. I said yes. He said good, that people like Liam needed to learn that actions had consequences, that family wasn't a shield for criminal behavior, that what Liam had done was predatory and calculated, not a series of desperate mistakes. I appreciated that. Appreciated someone in authority finally validating what I'd been saying for months. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. In that time, my phone didn't stop. Family members I hadn't heard from in years called to tell me I was destroying Liam's life. Cousins, aunts, uncles. My dad, who'd divorced Mom when I was 12 and barely stayed in touch, called to say I was being cruel. That Liam was young and stupid, not a criminal. I asked Dad if he'd be okay with someone stealing his car 5 times. He said that wasn't the point. I asked what the point was. He said family. Always family. Like that word was supposed to erase everything Liam had done. I stopped answering calls from numbers I recognized, started letting everything go to voicemail. Some messages were supportive. My supervisor at the hospital, Dr. Amanda Winters, called to say she'd heard what happened through mutual friends. She said what Liam did was theft, plain and simple, and I was right to press charges. She said the hospital had resources if I needed counseling or legal support. A few co-workers reached out with similar messages. One of my hiking friends, Nathan, said his brother had pulled similar stuff years ago, that letting it slide only made it worse, that I was doing the right thing even though it felt terrible. Those messages helped, reminded me I wasn't crazy, that boundaries mattered, that consequences weren't cruelty. The night before the preliminary hearing, someone knocked on my door at 11 p.m. I looked through the peephole. Natasha. 8 months pregnant, red-eyed, looking exhausted. I almost didn't open it, but something about her expression made me. She didn't yell, didn't threaten, just asked if she could talk to me for 5 minutes. I let her in. We sat in my living room, tension thick enough to cut. Natasha said Liam had told her everything, not the version he'd been telling Mom, but the truth. That he'd been stealing my car repeatedly, that he'd installed the remote starter, that he'd lied to me, to her, to everyone. She said she'd believed him every time he said I'd given him permission, that she'd thought I was the unreasonable one for being upset. She said she was sorry for the voicemail messages, for calling me names, for threatening me. She said she understood now why I'd done what I'd done. Then she started crying. Real, gut-wrenching sobs. She said Liam was facing years in prison, that their baby would be born while he was locked up, that she couldn't afford their apartment alone, that her family had disowned her when she got pregnant, that Liam's family, my family, was all she had. She asked if there was any way I could drop the charges. Not for Liam, for their baby, for her. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not guilt exactly, but empathy. Sadness for this woman who'd been lied to as much as I had, who was about to become a single mother because my brother couldn't stop stealing. I told Natasha I couldn't drop the charges, that what Liam did wasn't a one-time mistake but a pattern of criminal behavior, that he'd had multiple chances to stop and hadn't, that he'd driven my car drunk, damaged it, could have killed someone. She nodded slowly, said she understood, said she'd known what the answer would be but had to try. She asked if I hated her. I said no. I didn't hate her. I didn't even hate Liam exactly. I hated what he'd done, what he'd become. The person who thought he was entitled to my property because we shared DNA. Natasha stood up to leave. At the door, she turned and said something that stuck with me. She said Liam always talked about how lucky I was, how everything came easy to me, how I never had to struggle like he did. She said he resented me for years, even before the car thing, that he felt like I'd been the favorite, the successful one, the one who had his life together, that the car was just the latest example of how I had things he didn't. I asked her if she knew that I'd worked 70-hour weeks to save for that car, that I'd skipped vacations, meals, social events, that nothing about my life had been easy or lucky. She said she knew that now, that Liam had built a narrative in his head where I was the obstacle to his happiness instead of taking responsibility for his own choices. She left. I stood in the doorway for a long time after, thinking about resentment and entitlement and how people twist reality to justify what they want to believe. The preliminary hearing happened on a Thursday morning in early December. I sat in the courtroom with Detective Granger while the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Rebecca Yu, who specialized in property crimes, laid out the case. She presented the dashcam footage, the installation of the remote starter, the pattern of thefts, the DUI. Liam's lawyer, a public defender named George Andrews, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, tried to argue that the prior incidents were civil matters between family members, not criminal acts. That the remote starter was installed when Liam had legitimate access to the vehicle, that the DUI was a separate issue unrelated to the vehicle theft. Judge Margaret Crawford shut that down fast. She said a pattern of unauthorized vehicle use was absolutely criminal, regardless of family relationships. That installing a device to facilitate future thefts showed premeditation. That driving the stolen vehicle while intoxicated elevated the severity. She ruled there was sufficient evidence for the case to proceed to trial. Bail remained at $20,000. Trial was set for February. As I left the courtroom, I saw Mom sitting in the back row. I hadn't known she was there. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not disappointment. Something worse. Disgust. Like I was a stranger to her. Like I'd betrayed everything a family was supposed to be. I kept walking. What else could I do? Christmas was a disaster I saw coming from miles away. Mom called 2 weeks before and said I wasn't welcome at family gatherings anymore. That my presence would upset people. That I'd made my choice by pressing charges against Liam, and now I had to live with the consequences. She said it calmly, matter-of-factly, like she was telling me what time dinner started. I asked if she was serious. She said yes, completely serious. That Liam was her son, my brother, and I'd chosen the legal system over family. I hung up without responding. Spent Christmas alone in my apartment, working a hospital shift because someone had to cover the holiday, and it might as well be me. Dr. Winters brought me cookies. Nathan invited me to his family's dinner, but I declined. Didn't feel like explaining why I couldn't spend Christmas with my own family. On Christmas night, I got a message from my younger cousin, Olivia, who was 15 and apparently the only family member still talking to me. She said she'd overheard Mom and some aunts talking. They were planning to show up at the trial with character witnesses for Liam, planning to make me look like the villain, planning to tell the judge about how I'd always been jealous of Liam, how I'd held grudges, how I was vindictive. None of it was true, but they were going to say it under oath anyway. Olivia thought I should know. I thanked her, sent the information to Rebecca Yu. She said she'd be prepared. January came. I got my Subaru back from evidence processing. The front bumper had been repaired, the remote starter removed and destroyed. I had the shop install a new security system, one that would alert me instantly if anyone tried to tamper with it. Cost another $600, worth it for peace of mind. I started going to therapy. Doctor, Kenneth Patterson was a counselor who specialized in family trauma and boundary issues. He helped me understand that what I was experiencing was real grief, that I was mourning the loss of my family, or at least the version of my family I'd thought I had. That it was okay to feel sad and angry simultaneously. That protecting myself wasn't selfish or cruel. That consequences for bad behavior weren't punishment, but natural results. Those sessions kept me sane through January, kept me from second-guessing myself when the voicemails got particularly vicious. Dr. Patterson said something in our fourth session that crystallized everything. He said families that can't handle accountability were never actually safe families to begin with. That real love included boundaries, respect, and consequences. That what Mom and the others were offering wasn't love, but compliance. He was right. I'd been seeking their approval for my decision to press charges when I should have been trusting my own judgment about what was right. The trial started on February 9th. The courtroom was packed, Mom and her support squad on one side, me with Detective Granger and a few friends on the other. Liam sat at the defense table looking thin and exhausted. George Andrews presented Liam's defense. It was essentially that Liam had made mistakes but didn't deserve prison, that he was a soon-to-be father who'd acted out of desperation, not malice, that the family conflict had blown things out of proportion, that a suspended sentence and probation would be more appropriate. Rebecca Yu destroyed that narrative piece by piece. She played the dashcam footage, all of it, every instance I'd captured, showed the jury Liam's face as he calmly, deliberately, repeatedly stole my vehicle. She brought in Leonard Fisher, the locksmith, who testified about how I'd rekeyed my car specifically to stop someone from accessing it. She brought in Detective Granger, who walked through the discovery of the remote starter, explained how it worked, how long it would take to install, how it proved premeditation. She submitted Officer Vance's testimony about the DUI stop. She presented the threatening voicemails from Natasha as evidence of the family's attitude toward the crimes. Then she brought in Dr. Winters, who testified that I'd been visibly stressed at work for months, that I'd confided in her about the ongoing thefts, that this wasn't a sudden vindictive decision, but the culmination of repeated violations. George Andrews called Mom as a character witness. She testified that Liam was a good person who'd made mistakes, that he'd grown up in a loving home, never been violent, always tried his best, that he was about to be a father, that he needed support, not punishment. Rebecca Yu cross-examined her, asked if Mom thought theft was okay when committed by family members. Mom said it wasn't theft when Liam always intended to return the car. Rebecca asked if Mom had taught Liam that other people's property didn't need to be respected if you were related to them. Mom got flustered, said that wasn't what she meant. Rebecca pressed, asked if Mom had ever told Liam what he was doing was wrong. Mom admitted she'd told him to ask first, but that she'd thought I was overreacting to the situation. Rebecca asked if Mom had helped pay for the remote starter installation. Mom's eyes went wide. She said no, she didn't even know about it. Rebecca submitted phone records showing 11 calls between Mom and Liam the week before I'd rekeyed my car, asked what they'd discussed. Mom said she didn't remember. Rebecca suggested maybe they'd discussed how Liam could maintain access to my vehicle even after I changed the locks. George Andrews objected. Judge Crawford allowed it. Mom stepped down, looking shaken. 2 more family members testified for Liam. Both crumbled under cross-examination. Rebecca was surgical. She didn't attack them personally, but made it clear they were enabling criminal behavior because of misplaced family loyalty. Then Rebecca called me to testify. I walked through everything. The purchase of the car, the first theft, the second, the third, the fourth, the rekeying, the installation of the remote starter, the DUI, the damage, the pattern, the lies. George Andrews cross-examined me, asked why I hadn't just given Liam the car if it was causing this much family turmoil. I said because it was mine. He asked if I thought destroying my brother's future was worth keeping a car. I said I wasn't destroying anything. Liam's choices had consequences. Those consequences weren't my responsibility. George asked if I felt guilty about what was happening to Liam's family. I said I felt terrible for Natasha and the baby. But I also felt that Liam had destroyed his own family by repeatedly committing crimes, that if he'd respected my property the first time I said no, none of this would be happening. George tried a few more angles. None of them worked. When I stepped down, I felt exhausted but clean, like I'd finally told the complete truth to people who actually cared about facts instead of family politics. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they came back, the forewoman read the verdict. Guilty on all 4 counts. Liam dropped his head. Mom sobbed. Natasha, sitting in the back, just stared straight ahead like she was somewhere else entirely. Judge Crawford scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks out, said she'd review pre-sentencing reports and victim impact statements before deciding on the appropriate sentence. Rebecca Yu helped me write my victim impact statement. I kept it factual, outlined the financial costs of the thefts, the locksmith, the repairs, the security systems, outlined the emotional costs, the stress, the anxiety, the loss of family relationships, the feeling of being violated in my own home knowing someone I'd trusted had targeted me repeatedly. I didn't ask for a specific sentence, just said I wanted accountability. Judge Crawford read my statement at sentencing. Then she read statements from Natasha, who begged for leniency, from Mom, who blamed me for tearing the family apart, from 2 aunts who said Liam had learned his lesson. Then Judge Crawford spoke. She said Liam's actions weren't impulsive mistakes, but calculated, repeated crimes. That installing the remote starter showed planning and intent. That driving while intoxicated showed disregard for public safety. That the pattern showed a fundamental lack of respect for other people's property and boundaries. She sentenced Liam to 4 years in prison, with possibility of parole after 2. He'd also have to pay restitution for all my costs. The locksmith fees, the repairs, the security systems, the rental car, even my therapy bills. Total came to $8,312. Judge Crawford also issued a permanent restraining order. Liam couldn't come within 500 feet of me or my property after his release. She banned all indirect contact. No messages through family members, no social media contact, nothing. Liam would essentially be a stranger to me by court order. Mom screamed that the judge was destroying her family, had to be escorted out by bailiffs. Natasha left quietly, one hand on her pregnant belly. I sat there feeling numb. Detective Granger shook my hand, said I'd done the right thing. Rebecca Yu said the same. Dr. Winters, who'd taken time off work to be there, hugged me and said she was proud of me for standing up for myself. I went home, sat in my car for 20 minutes before going inside, called Dr. Patterson and scheduled an emergency session. He talked me through the guilt, the relief, the grief, all of it swirling together in a mess I couldn't untangle. He said what I was feeling was normal, that consequences hurt even when they're necessary, that I'd probably feel this way for a while, that it would get easier. I wanted to believe him. That night, Olivia texted me, said she'd been there for the sentencing, said she thought I was brave, said half the family was furious with me, but the other half, the younger cousins mostly, understood why I'd done it, said they'd seen Liam's entitlement for years, his resentment, his belief that he deserved things just because. She said she was sorry I'd lost so much family, but that maybe the family that remained would be better. I hoped she was right. 3 months later, Natasha had the baby, a girl. She sent me a photo through Olivia. Didn't ask for anything, just wanted me to know. The baby looked like Liam. Same eyes, same nose. I felt something complicated looking at that photo. This was my niece, technically. A person who would grow up with half the story, probably. Who'd be told I was the bad guy who sent her father to prison. Who might never know the truth. Or maybe she would. Maybe someday Natasha would tell her what really happened. Maybe not. I sent a gift card through Olivia, $200 for baby supplies. Didn't include a note. Wasn't sure what I'd say anyway. Olivia said Natasha cried when she received it. Said it was the first kind thing anyone from the family had done since Liam's sentencing. I didn't respond to that. Just asked Olivia to let me know if Natasha needed anything else. Some boundaries you could bend, some you couldn't. This felt like the right middle ground. 6 months after sentencing, I moved to a different apartment complex. Needed a fresh start somewhere Mom didn't know the address. Somewhere I could park my car without checking for family members. Somewhere that felt like mine. Dr. Winters helped me get a small raise at work, recognition for the extra shifts I'd been covering. I started dating someone I met at a hiking meetup. Told them the whole story on our 3rd date, expecting them to run. They didn't. Said their sibling had pulled similar stuff, that they understood complicated family dynamics. We're still together now. It's been 2 years since I called the police that night. 2 years since I watched Liam's life unravel because he couldn't stop stealing from me. Mom hasn't spoken to me. Most of the family hasn't. Olivia updates me occasionally. Liam's up for parole next month. Probably will get it given good behavior. The restraining order stands regardless. Natasha's doing okay, working 2 jobs, raising the baby. Liam's apparently been writing her letters about how he's changed, how prison gave him perspective, how he understands now what he did was wrong. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. Doesn't change anything for me. I still have my car. Still working at the hospital. Still hiking with Nathan and the group we've built. Still seeing Dr. Patterson monthly. Less frequently now, but still helpful. I think about Liam sometimes. About who he used to be before the resentment took over. About the brother I thought I had versus the person he actually was. I don't miss him exactly. I miss the idea of him. The version of family where brothers respected each other, where boundaries were honored, where love didn't mean unlimited access to each other's lives and property. I wonder if that version ever really existed, or if I just wanted it to badly enough that I convinced myself it did. Either way, it's gone now. What remains is peace. Real peace, not the fake kind built on avoiding conflict. I sleep through the night. I park my car without anxiety. I don't check the dash cam obsessively anymore. I trust that my boundaries will hold because I enforced them when it mattered. That's worth more than the family that couldn't accept them. Some people say I went too far. That family should forgive anything. That I could have handled it differently. Maybe. But every other way I tried failed. So I chose myself. Chose protecting what was mine. Choose consequences over compliance. I'd make the same choice today. Every single time. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.